Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world, from border to border, coast to coast, and to all the ships at sea. I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning into the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that often exists at the leading edge of healthcare technology. My guest today is Jim Bohnsack, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Aspirion. Aspirion is well known for being really one of the foremost leaders in the evolving technology that's really supporting and expanding what can be done with these new technologies for revenue cycle management. Jim, welcome to the Tate Chronicles.
Thanks, Jim. It's good to be here. I appreciate you having me.
One of the reasons I want to talk to you is because it's so hard to separate the hype around AI in healthcare. But it's certainly clear that back office processes and revenue cycle management is a type of workflow and process that's really perfectly situated for this technology. So how long has Aspirion been involved in AI and kind of what's the status of things now?
Yeah, no, Aspirion is a revenue cycle management tech-enabled services business, as you know, and we focus a lot of our effort on working with the largest healthcare provider system in the United States, attempting to bring both a combination of our subject matter experts, our 1,400 plus people in the United States, to collect the hardest dollars to collect for our healthcare provider clients. And that spans everything from complex claims in the world of motor vehicle accidents and workers' compensation, out-of-state Medicaid and VA and TRICARE, and then over into the denials space, which I think we'll talk most about today, where we are seeing a massive increase in the number of denials from payers, and specifically managed care payers. We see a shift in Medicare Advantage enrollment and other types of shifts into those enrollments of those plans, and them deploying payment integrity type technologies to review those claims upon submission and then review them even after payment and do different recovery attempts on those claims. And so we've been on a journey, one, around building out core workflow technology that allows us to distribute those accounts to the right resources at the right time and identify the right action needed to take to overturn and collect the appropriate reimbursement for our provider clients. And more recently, in the last year and a half, we invested heavily in technology around the newer technology that everybody's talking about, AI and ML and all the other buzzwords you want to throw in there.
Sure.
But specifically the use of large language models to help assist and then automate our subject matter experts in overturning some of the most complex clinical related denials.
Let me just ask you a question. One of the first things you said that kind of was of interest to me is complex claims. I'd really not thought of the fact that sometimes they're claims, and you don't know who's really the responsible parties, like you mentioned, if accidents or workman's comp. I guess that is an area that really takes some expertise to figure out who's the responsible party in those kind of cases.
It does. It can be state by state. It can be plan by plan. It's situation. It's situational in all cases. Many through the emergency room and others that are involved in auto accidents. So figuring out who is the responsible party, who's at fault, what the rules of the state are relative to coverage by an insurance carrier versus an auto carrier, and all of those elements are baked into our technology today to help us identify the right responsible party and then follow the various rules and guidelines to get the reimbursement due for the services that were rendered. And it takes, like I said, a combination of true subject matter experts. We've got over 180 attorneys and 90 plus certified coders and clinicians that do work across all of our service lines.
Let me propose a scenario to you, Jim, and you can tell me if this is some of the advantages that your technology is working with. And so obviously working numerous complicated claims over time, there obviously are some patterns as to what leads to successful reimbursement and what is just following a rabbit down a rabbit hole. And so, are you able to use AI to examine many of the things that have been done and see those patterns that lead to success and reimbursement? Is that the way you're using AI?
Well, a couple of ways. That is one
Mm-hmm.
way. As we started down this journey, yeah, one of the ways is obviously these machine learning models that learn on patterns over time. And so we've found that we've learned a number of lessons around just sheer volume of data is not enough. It needs to be the right data. It needs to be clean data. It needs to have high fidelity. It needs to have the right number of elements. And so as you feed those into machine learning models, which we've deployed across our service lines, it does allow you to identify those that are more likely to be overturned or to be paid and paid correctly. And so those are helpful as you think about constraints relative to staffing. And if you've got an associate, a teammate that can work 60 claims in a day or 60 accounts in a day, and you've got
Mm-hmm.
100, you want to prioritize the right 60 at the top of the list. And you're
Sure.
not going to work them all, but it does speed up the rate through which we can resolve them. And it does help us identify patterns over time relative to different payers' behavior, new rules that have been implemented, new denial types that are showing up, and those kinds of things. So that's kind of one way that we deploy the kind of later, greater technology. But then further from that is how do you begin to take this? It's basically rules-based logic
Right.
around resolving a specific claim. And
Mm-hmm.
when you get a denial from a commercial managed care payer that is clinical in nature, and it says, we disagree with the complexity that you suggested this case, required, and we're not going to pay it at that rate. We're going to pay it at a lesser rate. We're not going to pay it at all because we don't think it was medically necessary. Those are where we really are seeing major strides in the use of this technology, because it takes the ability for a person to digest an unstructured amount of data in the form of a medical record, compare it to a denial letter that says we're going to pay this as an outpatient versus an inpatient, so we're going to downgrade it, if you will, and then compare that against payer policies, the managed care contract, coding guidelines, and care guidelines, all unstructured data, and craft an argument that says, no, you said the rules that we had to comply with are these. We've proven that these rules were in fact documented in the medical record. In this case was in fact as complex as we stated on the claim. And therefore, here's the supporting documentation in the form of a summarized appeal letter that would give you evidence as to why you should pay it at the rate we originally submitted it at. And so it's combining all of those things. And until recently, in the last couple of years, with the advent of large language models, that wasn't possible. We were using, relational databases to do a lot of this work, and they weren't conducive to ingesting unstructured data and putting structure around it. And then further developing those rules to combine those referential data sets against the evidence in the clinical record to produce an output. And today we can do that. And we are doing that. Yeah.
Are your customers like large hospital systems and ACOs? Are those your
They are,
customers?
yeah, they are the top tier health systems in the nation. So the marquee logos you think of,
Mm-hmm.
we are contracted with many of them. And our original services were really about, there's a limited number of highly trained individuals that are either, nursing background, coding backgrounds, in our case, also attorneys that are available to even address these high dollar complex clinical denials. And again, it takes reviewing of up to, a 2,000 page medical record to say, can we find the evidence that this was in fact complicated due to sepsis, for example? And many payers are putting in rules that are saying, we're going to deny that or pay it at a lesser rate because we don't think it was that complex. And we have to form this argument that says, no, in fact, evidence in the medical record through clinical documentation, through test results and other show that it was in fact this complex and it should be reimbursed that way.
At some point, your company was doing this work with expertise. At a certain point, as many industries, but certainly in the work you're doing, somebody started, or a number of people started saying, I think machine learning or AI can help us with this. And so, what was the process, just, at a foundational level for, some group within the organization saying, hey, we need to check into this, and then finding the uh, resources, AI resources, who have the understanding of how they bring the greatest benefit? How did that process work out?
Yeah, it was. We are very grateful to have a great financial backer in Linden Capital
Mm,
Partner out of Chicago, which is
hmm
a healthcare only private equity firm that acquired Aspirion uh, now going on 2.5 years ago. And as part of that acquisition investment that they made, they said, look, one of the things we need to do is truly tech enable this business. And we need to
mm,
bring together this latest and greatest advancements in technology. And we believe we can automate some of these manual processes, not to remove the humans at all, but to further scale the humans so that the humans can work at the quote unquote top of their license. They can work on the most complex one-off
hmm
cases versus these repetitive case types. And so we didn't just jump in and say, let's just throw a bunch of money at it. Did it in a very kind of mindful way. One is we hired my colleague Spencer Alley as our chief AI officer, who is classically trained in these newer technologies. And then two, we hired a number of data scientists, three, as a matter of fact, internally, as you pointed out, to start to develop just these machine learning models. Let's start there.
Yes.
Third, we went and did three pilot projects with different earlier stage companies that were just technology focused alone and had built, underlying great technology focused on taking unstructured data, structuring it, and then producing a generative output. And one of the ones that we had the most success with early on was a company that we ultimately acquired called Infinia ML out of Durham, North Carolina. And for
Mm-hmm.
5 years prior to, after being formed out of Duke University in Durham, they had set out, it was a handful of PhD data scientists, about 10 machine learning engineers, all with master's degrees from Duke. They had set out to build a technology to do just that, to say, we want to take unstructured data, we want to structure it, and we want to produce a generative output. Where
Wow.
we apply that to different industries didn't matter to them as much as they were
Right.
testing a number of different industries. Healthcare was one of them, but they did legal services, law firms, they did property and casualty insurance, they did some financial services work. We piloted this with them and we said, the one thing we need you guys to do and prove that you can do is, can you take an unstructured medical record? Can you structure it in your platform, which we now call DocIQ? Can you
Mm-hmm.
then compare it to, again, the care guidelines, the payer policies, and the coding guidelines? And can you write a letter that looks like what our attorneys would write in terms of arguing to overturn a certain case and get it paid at the appropriate rate? And they did it. We
Wow.
went, oh, wow,
Yeah.
we should acquire them. And so we did. It's been a little over a year now. And this team that started off as about 15 people is now 38. They are solely focused on applying our technology and our platform called DocIQ against that use case. Again, take an unstructured medical record, look at the denial letter that explains why it's being denied, look at the care guidelines, look at the coding guidelines, look at the payer policies, and craft an argument that says, based on the evidence and the rules, we met this criteria, and in fact, we should be paid at the rate we originally suggested on our claim. And so that went live several months ago. It's had great success, and we're super excited about allowing us to bring that to bear to the provider market who can't otherwise with resources work on just the sheer volume of growth and denials, which is now, 10 to 12% on an annual basis. They just can't handle that volume. There's not enough staff and too much
Exactly.
expense to do it.
Yeah. Let me mention to our audience, if you're just joining us, I'm Jim Tate. On this episode of the Tate Chronicles, I'm speaking with Jim Bohnsack of Aspirion. The other side of this is I'd be curious, really lessons learned, or perhaps some of the challenges that you've encountered, such things that we always worry about staff resistance. Also, ongoing AI model fine tuning. So, as lessons are learned from the AI, how do you fine tune those algorithms? But first, let's just talk about staff resistance. Has that encountered very often when you implement your solution?
Anytime new technology shows up, there's always some level of skepticism and resistance. I would say that our team did a really good job of working with our current subject matter experts to truly understand the logic and the process they go through to write one of these successful appeal letters, and understanding how just by delivering certain aspects of our platform as it was built. And for instance, when somebody originally picks up a medical record, as I said, averaging in the hundreds of pages up to 2,000 pages in our world,
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
they do certain things first. They ask it certain questions. Give me the timeline of the visit, the stay. Show me the abnormal test results and where they are within the record. Show me where other physicians consulted on the case. These types of questions are kind of standard for them in terms of their querying of the medical record to begin with. And we said, okay, well, we need to do that anyway. So let's expose that in the form of, think of a very smart Adobe Acrobat reader that you're not doing control
Hmm.
font all the time for keywords, but rather we're using those prompts to pre-query that record. And so at the time that our attorney or a clinician picks up that record, those questions are already answered. That information is already indexed, and it's easy to navigate quickly and see the answers and where they are on which page of that huge medical record. And so just doing that alone, they saw, oh my gosh, there's benefit and I can do my job faster. So for us, it was a bit of a give them different tools along the way so that they can see how the automation could potentially work, and that it truly is not trying to take their jobs by any means, but rather help them do their job faster. And again, some of the repetitive nature of some of the case types, I don't want to do those. Those aren't exciting. It's just a manual
Sure.
kind of repetitive thing. And so
Sure.
by working alongside them and having their input and them forming those questions and saying, this is how I do the job, it removed a lot of that resistance for us early. There's still the doubters that say, nah, maybe this can't work, or, maybe this will take my job. But many of them have converted quickly as they saw the different pieces coming together and realized the fact that it does, in fact, help them be more efficient at their job.
You know, Kind of as an aside to this, Jim, I remember reading a pamphlet that was from, I don't know, the early users, maybe a century ago, of the pushback when the stethoscope was first introduced in the medical practice. That
Sure.
providers were used to putting their hand on somebody's chest or back or their ear to listen to, and all of a sudden there's this new interface, the stethoscope, and there was quite a bit of pushback from that. So yeah, there's always going to be that at the front end. Um, I'm interested about how you make adjustments or fine tune that AI model.
Yeah, we take not to get too technical, but we take a very specific approach in how we apply this technology to this use case that we're applying it to in writing the appeal letter. And we use what's called a RAG model, so retrieval augmented generation. And all that means is, unlike using just a large language model, Chat GPT, that everybody's familiar with, or other it's not as easy as just say, write me an appeal letter.
Right.
Our platform only looks at the four corners of that one document of the medical record. Like I said, it could be, again, 2,000 pages, but it only will use that to answer the question. So, and if it can't find evidence of the question we're trying to ask it, it will say, I can't find it. It is not there. Those kind of things. And so what that does is, very specifically, it removes the hallucination of a chat GPT who just tries to make up an answer and it sounds credible and real, but it's using the entire corpus of the internet to craft that answer. This is not that. This is, again, it is investigating that one medical record against a set of questions and a set of rules and guidelines, again, payer policies, care guidelines, or coding guidelines to say, here are the very specific questions and the evidence I need to identify. Can I do it within just this document or not? And if not, and there are many cases, as you can appreciate, where in fact, we didn't meet the guidelines. We didn't code it appropriately. Maybe we did it, but we didn't document it. And if we didn't document it, it didn't happen. We can't make it up. So there are cases where as you do that querying and the application, as you can imagine, it can read everything, whereas a human tends to skip through and find the key points. It will read it all and it will answer it, kind of definitively and show its work. So it shows the evidence of where it found it, what page it's on, highlights it. So it's very clear, here's where we're getting our answer, which helps, again, speed up the human in their review when it's still human in the loop, when they're part of the process. And as you move away from human in the loop to human near the loop, where they're doing more of a QA function, you can feel very confident that you've got the right answers coming to those questions. And it's not, again, making something up, or as they say, hallucinating. So we're very confident in the level of quality of those appeal letters that we're generating. We've had them reviewed blindly by some of our top experts we used 20 appeal letters we had written in the past that were successful. We fed that same clinical documentation into our DocIQ platform. We blinded those 20 cases. We had our top 5 attorneys review them and score them across different criteria for accuracy and strength of case, spelling and grammar, structure, et cetera. And the machine equaled or slightly did better than the humans.
Jim, when DocIQ is part of the workflow, is it on the front end or is it just working against denials? How's it working now?
Yeah, today it is merely focused on the back end after denial is received today. And we're not licensing this technology to the market. So people ask, how does it work, with Epic, those kind of things. We're using it to automate and speed up the work we're doing and the amount of volume and claims we can address and denials we can overturn. And we're using it to deliver a better outcome in terms of speed and accuracy and overturn rate for our provider clients once those denials are received. I've been asked many times, couldn't you push it up further and use it for clinical documentation improvement? Yes, theoretically, yes, because it's doing all of that review and it's showing gaps in documentation over time and quality of documentation on the pro side. So yes, we could. Yes, we may. Not today.
Well, I think that to do the approach of, it just seems the low-hanging fruit is in the back office. Of course, anything that helps documentation is a good thing. AI and such things as clinical decision support, things like that, until there's a lot more research to make sure there's not algorithmic bias in those things. I'm glad that the focus is the kind of work that that y'all are doing. We're almost totally out of time, but before we bid our audience goodbye, how can folks contact the company to learn more about the services?
Yes, you can visit our website at Aspirion.com. It's Aspirion.com. And you can contact us that way. You can also look me up on LinkedIn, Jim Bohnsack, Bohnsack. And feel free to shoot me a note. would love to explore. We feel like it's our duty as a provider centric organization to help our providers as we investigate and invest heavily in this technology and see what it can do in terms of reducing cost of care and other things, waste in the industry.
Jim, something I want to add about the website at Aspirion.com is there are a lot of resources there. I looked at some of the blog posts and videos. I learned a lot about revenue cycle management. So there's some good educational things there. I'm glad you're doing that.
We appreciate it. Yeah, we do believe it's our duty to help the provider organization. We know there's so much waste, and it is trying to help take some of that out so we can return it back to the providers and they can continue to invest in their communities and treat the patients.
Well, let me say to our audience, thanks for joining me on this episode of the Tate Chronicles. I offer a special salute to my guest today, Jim Bohnsack of Aspirion. You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. That's healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbors.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.